Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well and welcome to, depending on wherever you may live or however you choose to read your clock this early morning, middle of the night bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon. And folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to this early morning or middle of the night bonus upload, shall we? In 1998, I was 37 years old. I had been working with the Forest Department for about 12 years. There was a fire in the Appalachian National Forest that summer. The Bradwell Bay area was on fire when all of this occurred. The fire was raging really bad at that point, and we didn't know if we'd ever get it out. That morning, I reported to the command center on Helengard Station Road to get briefed on what I'd be doing that day. Me and another guy were given the task of driving around looking for animals along the road of the Bradwell Bay area. Animals would make it to the road and usually fall out if they were injured or had really bad smoke inhalation. Our job was to pick them up and take them to the vets at the command center. The vets would treat them and on some occasions euthanize the ones that wouldn't make it. So we're driving around the area heading south, doing about 45 miles an hour. Definitely faster than I should have been driving. I was talking to my partner and didn't realize how fast I was going when all of a sudden we see this black figure run out of the woods on all fours. It ran right up underneath my driver's side tire. I hit the animal with both the front and back tires. I was driving a 95 Dodge Ram 4x4, so I knew at that speed I had killed it. Immediately, we thought it was a bear, so we got out to pick the bear up and put it in the bed of the truck. And upon further investigation, we realized what we had hit was not a bear at all. It was a creature neither one of us had ever seen. It was about 6 feet tall. It had legs, kneecaps, and had feet just like you and I. The arms hung to about its knee. One arm, a matter of fact, was down by its knee. The other one was up over its head. I had run the creature over under its right underarm, across the shoulder blade, and over the back of its neck. The creature was covered in hair, about 3 to 5 inches long on its arms, legs, and neck. The hair on the back, ribs, and chest was much shorter. The muscle definition on this creature was phenomenal. It looked like a prize fighter, or one of those guys you'd see in the UFC. We flipped it over. The jaw was broken from where I had hit it with the truck. I could see, though, that it had a protruding snout, much like that of a baboon. Or what you'd think a werewolf would look like. It had eyes just like us. The thing looked a lot like a chimpanzee, as a matter of fact. We quickly radioed into the command center, and they sent 2 FWC officials out to our location. Within 15 minutes, the FWC officials arrived, and they told us they had never seen anything like it. So we all picked the creature up and loaded it into the back of the truck. The animal weighed about 300 to 400 pounds, which is a lot of dead weight. They told us they would figure out what it was and let us know. So we had been contacted by the command center at this point, and they told us to come back and make a statement about what we had seen. So we show up at the command center, and immediately we are brought to the back room, where we were to fill out an incident report. We were about 10 minutes into the incident report when we were asked to stop and wait. There were some people coming to see us. Within about 30 to 45 minutes, 2 government officials show up. They walked us out to a vehicle. They were asking where we ran over the thing. We told them where it was, and so they examined the area. The truck had no damage. There was a black steel bumper on the front, and the creature had hit the bottom of that, and the tires took care of the rest. There was really nothing on the truck except for the undercarriage. There were blood and hair. The officials collected blood and hair samples, bagged them, and put them away. Next, they asked us if we would get into the vehicle they came in and take them to the location where we had run this creature over at. So we compiled and got into the vehicle and left with the gentleman. It was a rather quiet ride back to the spot. They didn't say much at all except for a couple of exchanges with each other. We showed up at the spot and walked them through what had happened. Then all of a sudden, one of the guys, I'm guessing the guy in charge, turns and looks at us and says, "Congratulations, fellas. You ran over a bear." I said, "Sir, that was no bear that we hit." He quickly interrupted me with, "You do not understand. He ran over a bear." He then said that every time I told anybody about this, that I had run over a bear, I was never to speak a word about what we had actually hit, that I could face criminal charges. My whole retirement would go away. They said I'd lose my job, they'd slander me and make me look like a fool. So I looked at my partner, and we had no choice but to comply. On the ride back, it kind of struck me as odd that this was an actual government cover-up. They knew what this thing was that we had really hit. They had seen them before, and now they were in possession of the body. For some reason, they didn't want anyone to know, and they were going to great lengths to keep it under wraps. The main reason I'm sharing this story is I'm hoping one of the 3 other people, my partner and the 2 FWC officials, will come forward. I figured it's a lot harder to silence 4 people than just 1. People need to know these things are out there and that they are real. Today's second encounter. Weird things happen in the Appalachian Mountains. They are as old as time itself, and people have lived there will be the first to tell you. It can be otherworldly, and sometimes you just have to turn a blind eye for your own sanity, or just be like, "Yep, this is how it is." I grew up in a small town outside of Pisa National Forest. Lots of waterfalls, great hikes, beautiful views. It's an amazing place to be, especially in the summer. But what happened to me was in the dead of winter when I was about 17 years old. Before I share this, let me preface by saying that at the time I had just gotten my very first prescription glasses and was still not used to keeping them on 24/7. But although my vision was blurry, I know something was there with me the day this happened. When I was 17, I decided to do my senior project on nature photography. What better place to take photos than the forest? So I asked my mom if she would drive me into Pisa and let me take some photos as we wound through the woods. It was winter, so the trees were bare and the sky was gray. It was still a fairly pretty day, and I just wanted some pictures of the local flora. So my mom pulls over and lets me out, and I walk down a trail I had been down 100 times. After a short walk through the woods, you'd end up at a riverbank, a great swimming hole in the summer. And the way the bank curved, you could walk along the little stony shore a little ways past the trail. Mind you, I was wearing a bright orange raincoat, so I was incredibly visible. So I'm crouched down to take a picture of a cool old-ass railroad spike that had been sticking out of the earth for years, and all of a sudden I realized there's no noise. It was silent, no birds chirping, no nature sound, nothing. It's like I didn't even hear the sound of the water flowing. As this is happening, I suddenly realize exactly how visible and vulnerable I am.
If you've ever experienced the primal sort of fear, you know what I'm talking about. It was like alarm bells went off in my head going, danger, danger. As I'm sitting there with this feeling washing over me, I start to hear crunching footsteps. Again, the trees were bare, so there wasn't any foliage to block any view. The footsteps that I heard sounded like 2 feet getting closer and closer to the river from the opposite side of the bank that I was watching closely. I couldn't move. Whatever I saw was all gray and not human, but tall and appeared to be on 2 legs. It was getting closer and closer, and right as it was about to reach the river bank, I snapped out of my trance and turned and hightailed it out of there. I had never been more scared or ran as fast in my life. I booked it back to my mom's car and was obviously out of breath, so she asked me what was wrong. After I explained to her, she looked very worried and said that while I had been down the trail, she got this weird and sudden fear that something was wrong and was about to come and find me when I ran back. We left after that, and to this day sometimes we'll talk about it, but with no real explanation. I told my boyfriend this experience, and he insists that it could have been a crawler. I have no idea what it was, and although I wish I had gotten a better look or taken a pic, I'm glad I ran away when I did.
Today's third experience. I've had many odd experiences over the years, lots of which come from my time camping as I was working toward my Eagle Scout. I've spent extensive amounts of time in national parks and in the bush solo. These are places I generally feel comfortable in, but some of my experiences creep me out so much to this day that it deters me from solo adventures. I'm still an avid outdoorsman, but I'm also very cautious. This particular event occurred in about 2007 in Hila Wilderness, Hila National Forest in New Mexico. I'm from New Mexico and was raised in Roswell, so this is an area I've visited several times prior without major incident. On this particular trip, I was with a group of about 10 other people. We were 2 days into our trek with several more to go. For those who are not familiar with Hila, it's a stunningly beautiful area with trails that follow a winding river that carves beautifully through a canyon. There are high cliff sides jutting up hundreds of feet through some parts of the canyon in dense brush. Overall, it's a very isolated place and has an odd vibe to it. I've always associated that with the fact that it's an area with ancient Native American history dating back to at least 9600 BC that I know of, or maybe even further. Lots of crazy stuff has happened over the years there for sure. It has a compelling history. On this particular night, we were camped in an area where the river makes a U-shape as it wraps through the canyon. It was a fun day, and I had even managed to catch some trout that I ate for dinner. Right around dusk, I needed to relieve myself, so I wandered away from our camp into what I would describe as a ravine, or an arroyo where floodwaters drain into the river. There was dense brush and high-sloping banks on either side. All in all, it seemed like a good place to go to the John at the time. I made my way up the ravine, and thinking back on it, I walked an unreasonable distance from camp, which I found strange, as if I kept walking almost absent-mindedly, or was drawn further in, which is not my norm. As a preface, there is something I think many here are familiar with that is known as the silence. Typically, this phenomenon occurs in nature when there is a large predator in the area, and I know from hearing stories that most are familiar with it. Anyway, about halfway through dropping a wilderness deuce, I noticed it was eerily quiet, and I knew something was very wrong. When I say quiet, I mean the silence was deafening, if that makes any sense. By this time, it's nearly completely dark, and I'm out of earshot of my camp. Alarm bells intensely start blaring in my head and gut. My hair is standing on end. I notice a strange change in my perception.
likely caused by a twilight phase change, but the light around me seemed to become shrouded in a shadow quite suddenly. It was almost like someone had one of those sliding dimming switches for a light bulb. You know that feeling you get when you are sitting somewhere in public and you feel like someone else is looking at you. That's what happened suddenly and intensely. A few moments later, I heard a loud and distinct crack and an odd rustling from about 30 feet away, above me in the brush. It sounded like a person walking where no person should be. It sounded like human footsteps cracking on twigs. I was petrified to move, but I finished my business and stood as confident as I could muster, facing the direction of the sound. I was unarmed, and knowing what I knew about predators, I didn't want to make myself appear more vulnerable than a kid taking a dump alone in a ditch in the dark. I've had encounters with bear, mountain lion, etc., but this felt so much different. I didn't have the high ground, figuratively and literally. I yell out loudly, "Hello!" A few seconds pass, and the rustling continued in the distance. Silence. With no response back after a few moments at this point, I felt beyond vulnerable and terrified. Unreasonably terrified in hindsight, and after researching, I often wonder if infrasound played a role. With my hair standing on end, I took a few steps backward, and that's when I noticed the eyes. About 20 feet away above the bank of the ditch was a pair of eyes staring directly at me. I was in shock for a moment, as it was near where I heard the crack, slightly iridescent-looking eyes high above me on the bank, high enough that they'd either be a massive creature or a large creature in a tree branch. The silhouette did not make any sense, but shadows play tricks on your eyes and mind. I can't be sure it wasn't a large owl or something like that, but the circumstances and the general feeling make me believe otherwise. The silence and heaviness in the air was totally wrong. It's hard to explain. Instinctively, I back up as slowly as I could, facing those terrifying eyes, and that's when I heard another crack, right above me and to my right. That made me lose it, as that noise was much closer. At this point, my fight or flight kicks in, and I turn and sprint as fast as I could. Breathlessly, I make it back to camp, and I tell my friends that I think there is possibly a large predator in the area, and we should make a bear bag and take some precautions. Thinking back on it, it may have been a mountain lion or a bear. I don't believe so, but who knows? One thing I know for certain is that I felt like I was in absolute danger. All of my alarm bells were screaming to get out of there. Still freaks me out all these years later. The shade of that memory is always in the back of my mind whenever I'm in the woods alone. All in all, I'm just glad I'm not another backwoods missing person statistic. Today's fourth encounter. This happened to me in July of this year, and to give some context of where I was to discount any of the possible wildlife explanations at the time, I lived in the Midwest in a suburban area, fairly well populated, and near a very populated city. There was nowhere that could be considered rural within at least a 40-mile radius. So anyway, to start the experience, it was late at night. I was hanging out with my golden retriever, Leo, who was just turning a year in a couple of weeks at the time. I was just watching YouTube in my room while he lay on the floor next to me. It was 12:30-ish, and I was ready for bed, so I had to take him out before we both went to sleep. So I got him on his leash, and off we went outside. My family and I lived in a large apartment complex. The apartments have quite a few rooms and their own personal garage, but still have 8 to 10 apartments per building. So the buildings are very long and slim. Behind our building is a long strip of grass that goes out about 15 feet, then a large tree line that is 20 feet deep and about 200 feet long. Leo and I go out front around the building to the back, as we don't have an exit to the back. We're on the second floor, and we all have our own separate entrance. We make it to the back to the grassy area, and I walk into the grass with him to let him do his business. I'm on my phone, not paying any attention, really, and we stand there for a good while. I realize it's been a good amount of time and notice Leo hasn't moved a bit. I turned off my phone and looked at him and realized he hadn't moved from the spot we stopped at and was looking at another building right by the woods. He had been frozen the whole time. I pet him, and he looked up at me, and when I stopped petting him, he looked straight back at that same spot. I hadn't at that time realized he was looking at a spot that whole time until then, and looked over to where he was looking. My eyes hadn't adjusted to the darkness, and I could only see the shadow of the building. The only source of light was the street lights about 50 feet behind us. I looked back at him and quietly chuckled because I thought he had just heard a squirrel, and that's all perked up. He's a very cute, and I looked back at my phone. Leo, in the corner of my eye, about 15 seconds later, flinched back as if he had been startled by something and started to whine. I look over at the spot this time, realizing now he was scared of something he had seen while we had been out there. My eyes are now adjusted to the dark. I saw what he was fixated on now. In the shadow of the building, right next to the corner of the wall in front of the tree line, about 15 feet away, was a creature. I could only see a black outline, as it was not lit up enough, but it was massive. I know how tall the building is relative to me. When it's standing right next to the building, it was about 5 feet tall. That wouldn't be very tall if it were on 2 feet, but this thing was standing on all fours. The best way I can describe how it looked is when a bulldog snarls and kind of flexes its front legs when it's trying to intimidate something, but this was scaled up to be about 5 feet tall and much more muscles. Its outline was wide. There is no way that this is any creature from the Midwest. The only creature that is remotely close to that is a black bear. That's the only way up north. Nowhere near where I am. I'm in the southeastern part of my state. There are no wooded areas for a bear to live, and anyway, as I stated in the beginning, plus the max height black bear on all fours is 3 feet and not very broad. This thing surpassed that by a long shot and was very broad. I jumped back in fear and was kind of frozen after that for a solid 30 seconds, just staring at it. I then backed away slowly, keeping my eye on it the whole time. Leo starts to growl and snarl at it, and we rounded the corner. Leo has never acted aggressive like that before, so this just made me even more terrified. I then peeked around the corner no more than a second later, and it was gone. No noise, no shadow swiftly moving behind the building, just gone. There's no way something could move that fast behind a building without a sound, especially of that size. This freaked me out even more, and I sprinted back to the house. I would really like to think that I was hallucinating this, and I was just tired, but it was clear as day, even during the night. I've never told anyone this before, and it freaks me out still to this day. Today's fifth encounter. To paint a visual, the town I live in is set on some giant hills surrounded by a lake and bushland, in which you need to cross a bridge that runs parallel between the lake and the giant coal mine power station that our town is renowned for. It was a Sunday night around 8 p.m. I had just finished work at a fish and chip shop a town over from mine. As it was summer, so it was still light outside and wouldn't get dark until about 9:30, 10 p.m. I got into my car, and as I was driving home, I started coming towards the 4 lanes next to the power station toward my town. I see a shadow up ahead on the right running fast alongside a wire fence of the power station's car park. I immediately slow down because wildlife like kangaroos have a tendency to run out in front of your car. But this thing kind of looked like a dog. I thought at first, I remember thinking, what is a dog doing all the way out here? Then, as it comes closer, it's running on all fours, kind of like a gallop, straight toward my car. Then it diagonally leaps, crossing 2 lanes leading out of town, and on the 2 lanes in front of me. I could now see this thing clearly. It was not a dog. It was so much bigger than a dog. This creature had the exact face and head shape of a dog, but no fur instead. It was like extremely pale human skin. This thing was so close to my car I could see giant blue veins down its body to its long tail, as well as every joint moving in its legs as it ran. It then went across the road in front of me and leapt over a guardrail on the left of my car like it was nothing. It's like time just stopped. All I could hear was the blood pumping through my heart and into my head, left thinking, what was that thing? I didn't realize my car was at a complete stop in the middle of the road, and then my body just woke back up like a jolt of this overwhelming dread and just pure fear. My blood felt like ice. I immediately locked my doors and slammed my foot down and sped home. When I got home, I was so shaken up and trembling. When I told my family, the only way I could fully explain exactly what it looked like was the werewolf from Harry Potter. But my dad just laughed at me and joked if I had been smoking drugs. No one to this day believes me, nor have I heard anything else like it. Even though this happened years ago, it still terrifies me to walk my dogs down there to the lake on my own.
And there you have it, folks. I do hope you all enjoyed this early morning or middle of the night bonus as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. And I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that keeps this channel growing and going, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we all deserve. Please, everyone, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. They are out there and dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.